Welcome to NiCHE Conversations. I
Oh,
am
hi.
Jessica DeWitt, one of the editors here at the network in Canadian history and environment. And today I'm joined by Kesia Kvill. Will you tell us about yourself?
Hi, I'm Kesia. I'm in Edmonton on Treaty 6 territory. I'm a community engagement manager in the heritage sector right now, but
Yeah.
I've previously been a curator and I also spent several years working on a PhD that I chose not to finish,
Yeah.
focused on food in the First World War.
Yeah. We're kind of returning back to that period of your life today.
Yeah.
So I invited you to actually revisit a reflection piece from our 2018 CHES, which is our Canadian
Mhm.
History and Environment Summer School. And this was a year that we all came to Saskatoon and around Saskatoon. And you wrote about Caragana. So your piece was the edible windbreak, Caragana on the prairies. And someone recently commented on this article, which brought it back to my attention. But
Ah,
also, it's our 12th most read article of all time.
cool.
And I believe that is because if you Google Caragana, it is Wikipedia and then you. Like you have
Oh,
become the you have
someone needs to write something more about Caragana, I think.
so like just like that's how search engine optimization happens sometimes is that you end up being an expert on a topic when you didn't plan to be, but like people flock to this article a lot. So
Mm,
we're returning to it today.
awesome.
Um, and I think it has some like interesting like themes to it that are good to revisit and think about. But firstly, what is a windbreak
Mhm.
and why are they so prevalent on the Canadian prairie landscape?
Yeah, so kind of at their basic level, they're stands of trees. They're typically fast-growing trees,
Mm-hmm.
things like poplars and caragana.
Yeah.
And their intention is to help protect farmyards and fields by lessening the impact of wind. So they help kind of to retain and protect the soil and delicate. They also can protect stands of more delicate plants as well. So part of why they're so prevalent is related to the Indian Head Forestry Station and experimental farms in the prairies,
Mm-hmm.
because they were doing research in the early 20th century to kind of see how they could farm and make farming better or just kind of really maximize the landscape.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of, if you think about farming practices in the early 1900s, they're really kind of invasive. They are tilling the land up in a way that we don't do in the same sense now. They've taken out
Mm-hmm.
all of those native prairie grasses that grow and make the ground kind of retain water. Those are all gone now, so the soil is really at risk. And so they are thinking of ideas like how can we help the soil from blowing away, but
Mm-hmm.
also how can we help people feel more familiar in the landscape or have also potentially wood to use.
Yeah.
So they really promoted sending out these trees to settlers so you could request them for free. You just had to kind of prove that you were going to keep them growing and take care of them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they sent all of these kind of out across the prairies from the forestry station at Indian Head. And yeah, that's why we have so many of them, because they were actually
Yeah.
a pretty effective way of helping to retain soil, but also something to help settlers reform the landscape, is what I would say,
Mm-hmm.
into a space that looked more familiar to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's going to be a theme throughout this conversation.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think that it's kind of windbreaks are kind of a example of a shifting baseline, I think, because all of us that are alive now, like the prairie landscape with the windbreaks is kind of like we just assume that that's it feels like that's how
Yeah,
it's always looked, but this is like a
yeah,
very manufactured landscape, right? This is very
completely.
purposeful and
Mhm.
not native.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so your 2018 reflection focuses on Caragana. So is
Mhm.
part of these windbreaks, right? So what is this plant? Why is it here? And maybe if you could share a bit about your memories of it, which you do in your piece as well.
Yeah, so Caragana, I think I said this in the piece as well, is like
Mm-hmm.
also called Siberian pea shrub, and it's kind
Yeah.
of because it produces these legumes that look like little peas in
Mm-hmm.
their shells. So it's like a really fast growing plant. but it also, because it has legumes that it grows, it fixes nitrogen into the soil. So it also has another benefit to it. There's like really tiny green leaves on it. And in the spring, it blooms. Well, spring probably closer to summer for a lot of
Yeah.
areas. It blooms with these little tiny yellow flowers.
Hmm.
And apparently, you can eat the peas that come off this bush, but I've actually never seen anyone do it. And I don't know that that's super common to do that. Um, but it's like really here because of that Canadian government horticulturalists testing out a bunch of different plants from around the world to see what would grow really well. And
Yeah.
they found the Caragana does really great. And so they sent a bunch of those and their seeds and their seedlings all around the prairies to different
Hmm.
farmers. So it's like really here because we had a government horticultural program.
Yeah. Yeah. And they are pretty cute.
They
They're
are
still very common in like greenhouses and stuff when I'm
completely.
looking around. Like it's still
Yeah.
a pretty popular option, even though we now know that maybe not the best option.
Yeah, they're potentially like a little bit invasive. I think now having talked
Yeah.
with some of my friends who grew up on farms, they're like, oh, Caragana, we have to like dig so many of those out all the time growing up. Ugh. And
Yeah.
I still kind of love them as like hedges, but one of the cool things at the Saskatoon, the old experimental farm there, they had different kinds of Caragana and a weeping Caragana
Yes.
tree, and I
That's
was like,
great.
that's so cool. Like, so I
Hmm.
think there's options where we could still plant them that are a little bit less like fast growing and like kind of take over every space that they want to be in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like when you talk about like a memory of them, like definitely in the towns, people were also using them as hedges because
Mhm.
they build really nice privacy. They're really tall,
Yeah.
or they can grow quite tall if you let them grow. But they also do require a lot of maintenance to like make sure that they don't take over everything.
Mm.
So like my really clearest memory and like the earliest memory I have of these Caragana is like walking to school. There was one on someone had planted as one of these privacy hedges, and my mom stopped, and I must have been quite young because my mom walked to school with us because she also taught at the school, and she's like,
Mm.
"Oh, look at this! These flowers. If you pull the bottom part petal out of it, and there's a little tiny little bit of nectar on the bottom. It's really sweet. You could taste it." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I did that, and like I don't remember walking by that tree stand without grabbing a flower off the bush when the flower's there to try to find the nectar. Because sometimes they don't always have nectar in the bottom because it might have been like not developed yet or
Yeah.
something else like had taken it. So it was like very exciting to try and like I would pull them until I had a taste of nectar and it was quite fun. So I like remember
Mhm.
seeing that, and then I also can remember like like if you drive around the countryside, there are often a lot of those stands of these Caragana bushes on people's farmyards or just like
Mhm.
alongside the roads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at the chest, I remember you like we have the picture that I took of you
Yeah.
showing people that you could like eat this like nectar thing. And I remember that being really cool. It's
Yeah.
just a transfer of knowledge, right? If someone's like, because that is your like home like
Hmm.
knowledge of the
Yeah.
landscape and plants and stuff. And that was neat, I thought. So it kind of rolls into our last question. So
Yeah.
your reflection really highlights to me the way that
Yeah.
our childhood or like quote unquote home landscapes share the way really shape the way that we see the rest like the world for the rest of our
Hmm.
lives, right?
Yeah.
Whether we wanted to or not.
Totally.
So since 2018 you've moved back from Ontario back to
Hmm.
the Canadian prairies,
Yeah.
and I wonder if your relationship to land and place has changed
Hmm.
since you wrote this piece.
Yeah, that's like such a really interesting question that you sent me to like think about. I was like, has it and how has
Yeah.
it? Because there's a certain element of like, oh no, it hasn't. But at the same time, it's like, how can it not? Because you moved away.
Hmm.
Like, there's that saying, like, you can't go home again because everything has changed. I've changed. The
Yeah.
landscape has changed a little bit as well. Um, and the like way people interact with the landscape is also changing. I
Hmm.
think about kind of like for myself, I've even noticed like from growing up in the prairies and then leaving and then coming back, like the climate has actually changed a fair amount, which is fascinating and
Mhm.
terrifying. Like I went for a walk with a friend a couple summers ago and it was like that 40-degree heat for like a
Yeah.
long time. It did not get that hot here when we were younger. Like you
Mhm.
could be outside all day and max like 25 was exciting. Maybe we'll go to the beach. It's 25 degrees out. But it wasn't ever really super hot. I was just like thinking too about how I grew up very much involved in historical agricultural demonstrations. So I
Mhm.
kind of am like the connection to the Caragana, but also the things that it made me think about and how prairies like agriculture has developed was
Mhm.
really like something intuitive to me to think about and something that I was like, oh yeah, like I hadn't fully like combined all of these things to like, oh, I know how
Yeah.
this machine kind of works and how this plowing, like the giant plows pulled by like steam engines. I go on the back of this plow now and I'm like, oh, I could see how they like cleared the land so quickly, but also like how absolutely like devastating this is to natural environment.
Mhm.
And I don't think I thought that much about it when I was growing
Yeah.
up in the same way. I was trained to think about it, but I hadn't really like combined all these pieces together for myself. Yeah, and I also think a lot more now about like sustainable agriculture and like urban agriculture in a way I didn't, because growing up in the prairies, I grew up with like these larger farms. I had thought about farming and then I moved into cities and I
Mhm.
was like, oh, like for me it matters so much like that tie between like the city and the country and how food gets into the city. And
Mhm.
also for me, like I see cities rapidly growing into suburbs as like a threat to agricultural practices and potential. Like I know that some of the best farmland in Alberta is under the city of Edmonton and we
Yeah.
can't get that back. So how can we incorporate some urban agriculture into our landscape? So I like really think about it that way. And then the other thing is that I now actually own a house and land. So, like, that completely changes your relationship as well, because now the
Mhm.
investment on the space that I have makes me think about, like, who might live here next, or how can I contribute to this in a way that will help
Yeah.
me to make an impact on the environment and like get rid of the lawn over time,
Mhm.
or plant wildflowers, or try to really hard get rid of that common bellflower that's growing in my front garden for some reason that someone planted because they thought it was pretty, but
Yeah.
it's super spreads and invasive. Or like shade is going to become super important in the cities, and how can
Mhm.
I help? What trees can I plant to help me not want to get air conditioning one day because I know that that might have an impact on the environment. So, kind of like, I think a lot more about what plants I plant and where they go in a way that I kind of never did. And then I also just really want to get a Caragana plant of some kind that's not going to spread. Yeah.
We have like
Yeah.
a pygmy Caragana in the backyard
Ooh, cute.
that I actually want to get rid of. You're gonna
Oh
have to
no.
send it.
Ship it to me. Send it to me. By the train. It'll be very historic.
Yeah. It's like I like that you mentioned the climate because I've been in Saskatoon for 15 years now
Yeah.
on the prairies, and I have noticed a change in climate. I
Hmm.
haven't even been here for 2 decades. Like,
Yeah.
it's pretty scary sometimes. And like, yeah. And I mean, I've talked before about, I come from the woods of Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
grew up in the middle of the forest, so I definitely feel a pull towards trees. And no matter how much I want to like love the prairie landscape, and I do, like
Hmm.
it doesn't feel like home. Like it doesn't feel
Yeah.
comfortable to me.
Hmm.
I'm more like drawn to the areas of the city that are like populated by huge trees that are absolutely not native.
Yeah.
um, and I
Well,
think yeah, go ahead.
I think about that too, because like I live in an old, mature neighborhood now, but my grandmother also grew up in the same neighborhood, two streets over, and I have pictures of the street in the 1930s, and there are no
Yeah,
trees. And in
yeah,
Edmonton, there's this huge conversation about the urban canopy and like the importance of the trees and protecting them from the elm diseases. I was like, all of these trees were planted like after the Second World War.
yeah.
This is fascinating, but like they've now become such a part of our like expectations of what we should
Mm,
have.
yeah.
And that's like still that part of us that like wants to have trees to feel settled somehow. And I think
Hmm.
that's very interesting because even I grew up in Parkland County, which has a few natural trees and a bit
Yeah.
more than like southern Alberta and Saskatchewan, where it is treeless for the most part. So like I definitely like having trees around too. but it's like
Yeah.
so inherent to us that, oh, they're natural because they're trees.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like these feelings that we have inside ourselves can help us like
Hmm.
empathize with settlers who
Hmm.
came here and then desired to change the landscape to feel like
Yeah,
home, had the
totally.
power to do so. We're not thinking of the ecology. We're not
No.
thinking of the indigenous folks who, use the landscape,
Yep.
the natural landscape.
Yep.
But, like came with these feelings, came with these attachments, came with these assumptions of
Hmm.
what home should be, what the space should feel like.
Hmm.
So I think there's like a lot of affective, like emotional history work around that could be
Hmm.
done.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
what's coming to
Well,
my mind.
I think I saw a picture, like I have a Microsoft computer at work and it changes the background. And I
Yeah.
saw this like picture of a canola field and I was like, oh, that must be in Alberta or Saskatchewan. And it was like Sweden. And I was like,
Ah,
oh, this is fascinating because like the people that settled in the area that I grew up in and planted canola
yeah.
were from like Scandinavia. And I was like, oh, so the landscapes, like there is something to that kind of seeking out a landscape that feels
Mhm.
familiar and
Yeah.
like so
Yeah.
interesting.
And how like the Russian steppe is like we learned at Chess
Yeah.
2018. I think David Moon gave a talk on it. Is
Yeah.
like almost is very close ecologically to
Hmm.
Saskatchewan, Alberta's prairies, and then there's so many immigrants from around that region that came
Hmm.
here. Yeah.
And they like bring those plants, and then also we
Mm-hmm.
figure out like, oh, the plants from here will go around here too.
Yeah.
Like it's so interesting how much like settlement has impacted the landscape and now what we think is normal here.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. See, that was a good
That
conversation.
was great. I love talking about everything related to space and people and landscape.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
was fun. Well, thank you for joining me today. Thank you
Yeah.
for writing such a popular piece on
Oh.
Caragana. And uh, yeah, it was nice to relive it
Mhm.
and to like I don't know, like before pandemic times, chess
Yeah.
was a lot different.
Yeah.
And it was just a really fun event. It was nice to think about it again and think about
Yeah.
this topic. So,
Yeah, that was a
yeah.
really impactful time for me, and I'm very grateful that NiCHE has that summer school because it really did kind of change how I think about things and
Yeah.
environment and food and all those great connections. And thanks
Mhm.
for giving me the opportunity to reflect on like what's happened since.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks,
Yeah.
Kesia. Take
Thank
care.
you, Jessica. Bye.
Bye.